These are the ones we'll cover this morning. White mold, bottom rot, cabbage yellows, some leaf blights, downy mildew rust, and some issues that some growers have been having the past couple years with Alternaria issues in broccoli, as well as some bacterial leaf and head rots. And I'll talk about some of the diagnostic features. So when you're out in the field, you can diagnosing is half the battle, and then controlling is the second half. White mold, very common in New Jersey as well as other regions of the United States. It's a soil-borne fungus. These are the black fruiting bodies of the sclerotia that survive from season to season. And once you get white mold in a field or in a block, it's going to be there for a very long time, because these guys can survive for years, 10, 20 decades, I guess. All right, so it's the long-term survival, and we simply know it as drought, as some of you are aware of. Here's another symptom where the whole plant would just simply collapse. That is because the water flow has been cut off the plant at the base, and the whole plant just drop, as you can see here in this picture here. Again, what's interesting about this disease is, one plant may have it, and the ones next to it may be completely healthy, and then, 100 yards across the field, another plant may just have it as well. Okay? And that's because the sclerotia in the soil are germinating and infecting those plants in a random pattern. So it's more of a random type pattern than you would think. Again, I said earlier, it's very common, causes a number of different problems and a number of different crops, so the host range is wide. So if you have white mold issues in tomato or potato or bean, or it could show up in your lettuce and your other cole crops. So you want to pay careful attention to your crop rotations, because this is one of those pathogens, like I said, has a large host range. And I said earlier, once it's in your field, it's going to be there for a very long time. And your first line of defense is going to be crop rotation and long crop rotations. Okay. And again, the longer you can stay away from susceptible hosts, the better you're going to be in the long run. It's favored by prolonged cool wet weather or wet soil conditions. From a control standpoint, there's not a whole lot of options. You'll find these in the 2016 Commercial Recommendations Guide. You should have gotten one if you registered. Options would be Endura, which is Boscula, which is a frac code 11 fungicide at transplanting or thinning, as well as Fontellus, again, which is just another frac code 11 fungicide. So there's very limited control options. Anybody use Contans? Organic. No, it's a biological compound. You apply it to the soil a few months before you plant, and the Contans will attack and destroy the sclerotia. Right, and that's how that compound works. The key is you need to have it in your block, in your field, 3 or 4 months before you go into that field, because the fungus needs time to attack and kill the sclerotia. So you can't put it down when you're transplanting or seeding. Okay, and that's what you need to remember here. Bottom rot is caused by Rhizoctonia. Very common, very diagnostic feature. You would see that some browning of the lower margins of the leaf near the base. It's going to be almost a dry rot. And if you look very closely, sometimes on the leaf surface, if it's heavy enough, you can see the brown shoestring or the mycelium of the fungus. Sometimes with the unaided eye, or sometimes just with a hand lens. And that's what I would look for when people bring me in stuff to look at. I'll be looking for the brown hyphae. The cool thing about this fungus is it doesn't produce any spores, but it does always branch at 90-degree angles. That's a simple diagnostic feature of the fungus. Its brown color and the way it branches. Again, it's caused by Rhizoctonia solani. Again, it's another ubiquitous soil-borne pathogen, so it's going to have a large host range. And probably could find it in every field I look for it in. So it's almost always present. This one guy is favored by warm, wet weather. All right, under severe pressure, you can use quite a large portion of your crop. Okay. And your symptoms always begin on the lower leaves, the small brown spots, and it can extend quickly up the surface. Again, you will look for that tannish brown mycelium on the surface of the leaves. I say here it looks like kind of like cobwebs. All right, bottom rot often leads to secondary rot invasions caused by soft rotting bacteria. All right, and that's going to be caused by, if it stinks, it's soft rot. All right, pretty much universally across all crops. If it's something stinks and smelly, it's most likely caused by soft rot bacteria, which is breaking that plant down or fruit down. From a control standpoint, in either fall or spring, you get just a couple options. The Bordine, which is raw at 1.5 to 2 pounds per acre, or again, this Endura Bosculid, again, frac coat 7 at 8 to 11 fluid ounces per acre, again, at thinning or transplanting in 10 to 20 days later. So with Endura, you get some bottom rot control as well as white mold control if you use it at planting. Cabbage Yellows is caused by a fusarium. Again, common soil-borne fungus. The diagnostic feature of yellows is the formations of the leaves. Well, one half of the leaf will stop to develop, and the other half will continue because this vascular system's been cut off somehow, and you get a lopsided leaf. Okay, and you also get a wilt in this. So if you're seeing these lopsided leaves on your plant, you're most likely dealing with a fusarium problem. It's caused by Fusarium oxysporum. It's a wilder, one of the wilders. It usually occurs 2 to 4 weeks after transplanting. Again, plants often appear this yellowish green, which I showed you in this last slide. Again, and the leaves become lopsided or warped. Like Sclerotinia, it can survive in the soil for many years. So once it's in your block or your field or your garden, it can be there for a very long time. And your best option with Fusarium Cabbage Yellows is to look at the resistant varieties. If you haven't looked at the variety or commercial guide in the last couple of years, or you haven't gotten one, you need to do so because the horticulturists in the regions have done a very good job of updating all of our variety lists in the front of each crop sections. All right. So if you're still working off a 214 guide, the chemistries have changed for the herbicides, insecticides, and fungicides, but also the varieties have been really updated. So you really need to pay attention to the newest guides. And you all should have gotten one when you registered. So make sure your farm crew has one as well. A marginal leaf blight. This is a problem typically we see over in the Vineland area. Usually I get samples after a heavy rain or a big storm. It's caused by what I call a junky pseudomonad. Again, it's one of those pathogens that's going to be almost ubiquitous in the soil and only causes problems when the environmental conditions are right. And the bacteria get splashed up into the leaf canopy, and it usually just causes the infections occur on the edges of the leaves, and you get this marginal necrosis, which will sometimes, a lot of times, render the crop unmarketable. Very common, find it in the soil. It often shows up during heavy rains and winds. Whenever you get sandblasting, remember bacteria need a wound or natural opening to enter the plant. So if you get sand abrasions on the leaf surface, that'll allow bacteria in, or the bacteria can enter the plant through the hydrothodes at the margins of leaves. It's very difficult to predict and control. That's the hardest thing when growers come in and they have this problem. There's not a whole lot I can tell them to do, other than if it shows up in the field. You can some growers like to use an oxidate or a disinfestant product to try to reduce the bacterial populations into the field. All right, so if you've dealt with this in the past, remember you can come in after a heavy rain event and maybe try to use an oxidate to help knock back some of the populations. But again, at that point in time, most of the damage has been done. Okay. Lettuce downy mildew. Anybody see downy mildew this past year? I don't see a whole lot of it in New Jersey for some reason. I get a sample, maybe one sample a year, and it's always just it's not a big issue on the farm. Unlike your downy mildews that you would see on your cucurbit crops, the one that occurs on lettuce is going to produce a white fuzzy growth. Remember on squash and pumpkins and gourds, the downy mildew is going to produce a brown spore. All right, and they always sporulate on the bottom sides of leaves because they don't like the UV light. Prevents them from sporulating in most cases on the top sides of leaves. Lesions tend to be angular, variable, very, very nondescript. You get some irregular yellowing, but if you look on the bottom sides of the leaves in the morning or late in the evening or after heavy rain or under cool conditions, you probably get to see the sporulation. It's rarely going to kill an older plant, but it can cause problems if it comes in early on your crop. It's caused by bremia. It can survive on infested seed, and it can also produce oospores on infected debris. All right, spores are produced at night, like a lot of downy mildews, and then are released typically in the morning, depending on the temperature and the relative humidity in the crop. Of course, anytime you overhead irrigate, you get a favored disease development in almost any disease. All right. Again, here, control begins with resistant varieties and preventative fungicide applications. Again, if you haven't checked out the variety list in front of the crop sections in the last couple of years, please do so. There might be something newer out there that you might be interested in. Downy mildew control, we have a lot of good downy mildew products on the market now across multiple crops. Brevis, which is manupropamid, it's in frac code 40. It's been on the market a couple years. Zampro, which is one of our newest chemistries with our newest frac code 45, has been on the market 2 years now. Reason, frac code 11 fungicide. The Zimerivon works very well. It's a combination of fluoride pyroxide and pyroxystrobin. Contains 2 frac codes as well as Form and Prevacure, which have been on the market for a number of years now. Again, it's going to be weekly applications as long as disease conditions are favorable for disease development. And again, from a resistance management standpoint, you want to rotate these, use as many different chemistries as possible. These recommendations come straight out of the guide, okay, which we update every fall. Downy mildew with spinach. Again, we grow a lot of spinach in New Jersey. Rarely see this. It's caused by Piranospora. This one only infects spinach. It likes cool, wet weather. Again, this one will produce a large purple mass of spores on infected leaves. I think the one main reason why we don't see downy mildew on spinach in New Jersey is because the major producer is planting resistant varieties. And that's your best line of defense against any disease. All right, so if you're growing, baby spinach or spinach for a fresh market or a CSA or your own roadside stand, again, do yourself a favor and look for the resistant varieties. Okay. Some of these varieties also have resistance to white rust, which I'll talk about in the middle. And the fungicides that you use to control downy mildew with spinach, you can also use to control white rust, which again I'll talk about that now. It's caused by Albugo occidentalis. Produces a very distinct symptom on the bottom sides of leaves with these white pustules. Again, for the amount of spinach we grow in the southern part of the state, I rarely see this disease. Once every 2 or 3 years, because they're growing resistant varieties. It's favored, again, like a lot of the other downy mildews. White rust likes the cool, wet weather. This guy can also be found on lamb's quarter, but it's not the white rust you find on morning glory. You know conditions are right for white rust on spinach when you see it on morning glory, which becomes heavily infected with it during the growing season. Anyone see this lately? Okay. Rotation. Again, look for those resistant varieties. Control of downy mildew and white rust, you got a number of options, all that are very good. I would focus on the downy mildew specific materials first, such as the Presidios, the Randmans, rhythm gold coppers. All these chemicals work very well. Again, it just comes down to recognizing what pathogen you have and then applying the right fungicide at the right time. And knowing in this case you're going to get a 2-for-1 deal. If you're trying to control white rust, you're going to get some downy mildew control and so forth. But again, all these are listed in the 2016 guide. You have to remember, from a fungicide standpoint, in our recommendations guide is if something no longer works or the efficacy is too low, we take it out of the guide. Okay, so it is truly a recommendations list based on our own research and based on the research of others that gets published, reports that we look at, and we look at efficacy. Okay. In general, the higher the fungicide is in the list, the better we feel the efficacy is. Doesn't mean the one's lower or worse, but we feel like we get a little bit better control. And that's one thing you want to realize when you look at our 2016 guide. Ordinary leaf blight. Has anyone dealt with this the last couple of years? I've gotten more and more samples down at the lab. It's an ordinary. Ordinaries are very common across multiple crops. It produces you've probably seen Alternaria on tomato in the past. Again, it can show up on the leaves, which isn't terribly a problem, but if it gets on the head, in this case broccoli, it's going to cause significant damages, and that's what we've seen the past couple years. I think it has a lot to do with some of the prolonged wet periods we've had. We had a really wet June last year in South Jersey, so conditions were kind of ideal for Alternaria development. So it's going to be one of those diseases, once you see it, you're going to have to spray for it and keep up with a decent spray program. Again, Cercospora, this is an image that Steve sent me. I see it very rarely on greens in South Jersey, but it does show up every once in a while. Again, there's quite a number of chemistries that work against Alternaria and or Cercospora, and controlling one, by default, you're going to control the other one based on the chemistry. The important thing is to remember that the vast majority of the fungicides that you use to control downy mildew on your crops, these crops aren't going to control the other leaf spots. Okay? So if you have downy mildew and Alternaria, you're going to have to use really two different types of chemistries. All right? A downy mildew specific chemistry for the downy mildew, and one of these others for any other leaf spot that may show up during the production season. All right. Again, azoxystrobin, which is Quadris. Quadris is off-label now, so a number of companies can now produce it. So in the guide, much like we did with chlorothalonil, Quadris is now just going to be listed as azoxystrobin. So it may be for sale. I asked Quadris or any other name that a company that wants to distribute gives it. Fondelis, Cabrio, another frac code 11, chlorothalonil, and some of these others all work very well. Again, here this comes down to recognizing what the pathogen is and a good fungicide rotation. Again, when it comes to dealing with some of these chemistries on the different crops, you really need to pay attention to this table in the back of the crop, because we had an issue in Pennsylvania last year where a grower thinking that chlorothalonil was labeled for kale and kohlrabi in the front of the guide. In the crop section early up front, he accidentally sprayed chlorothalonil on kale, which is not labeled for. Okay, so if there's any questions about what crop and chemistry you want to apply, make sure you look at this table. And really the only outlier here is chlorothalonil is not labeled for collards, kale, and kohlrabi. Okay. And that was an issue we had in Pennsylvania. The grower misinterpreted what we said in the other guide, and there was an issue when it came down to sell the crop, I think. Bacterial leaf and head rot. Again, this is caused by soft rot bacteria. Do I have no, I don't have a good picture. If something stinks, just remember it's a soft rot bacteria. Okay, that bacteria originates from the soil. It's almost ubiquitous. I bet you if I sampled 100 fields, I would find Erwinia, or whatever they call it now, 100 fields. All right. Again, it's going to be splashed up. These are some of the specklets. This is a slide from Steve. This is bok choy. All right. In the past couple years, we've seen it show up in the heads of broccoli, like Alternaria. All right. And they almost look the same. I didn't have a good slide to show you. But again, if it doesn't stink, it's probably Alternaria. If it stinks, the head stinks. Cauliflower, broccoli, it's probably a soft rot. Again, the only effective control of controlling soft rot on the head is what they call using tolerant varieties. And these are the different varieties that they say have the dome-type heads, so the water drains off or runs off the head. It doesn't sit up there and allow the bacteria to sit there for any period of time. Again, check out the variety list in the front of the crop sections for the ones they have the list of its dome shape and so forth. Again, anybody use hot water seed treatment or artichoke, or what do you use it for? Tomatoes. For bacteria? You feel it works? Ask me next year. Oh, it's the first year you tried it? Okay. Remember, with hot water seed treatment, again, depending on where you get your seed, all your commercial seeds should be clean. Usually, if they're not sure, the seed packet will come with a disclaimer on it somehow, or say something. But if you can buy hot water treated seed, do so. You can also hot water treat it yourself. Remember, hot water seed treatment will kill any bacteria that's on or within the seed coat of some of these crops. Pepper and tomato, we use it a lot for, especially on heirloom tomatoes, where we know that a lot of that seed may be dirty. So if you're swapping seed or getting seed from a catalog, anybody in here organic? No, okay. You guys would be most at risk. But that is an option on these crops. Anybody have problems with the virus at all? Again, I don't typically see virus problems on these crops, but there are a number of aphid-transmitted viruses that may show up, and you would see the distortion or the mosaics in the leaves. Again, start with clean seed. That should say 2016, not 8. Don't follow this recommendation. Again, and just be aware of potential sources for viruses. Remember, cucumber crops can carry a lot of viruses, and aphids, for the most part, transmit them from crop to crop and from field to field in our area. Again, it's difficult to control aphids in your fields if they show up. So your insecticides need to be timed properly. And we just never know what viruses those aphids have, or if they're even present that they're carrying. So you want to scout on a regular basis. Does everybody get the Plant Pest Advisory? If you don't, you should sign up for it. It's free. If there's a disease issue, an insect problem, something new, something that needs to be addressed, it'll show up here first. You sign up, you give us your email address, and it'll come straight to your computer or your phone. So if there's a downy mildew issue on cucumber crops in Virginia, I know it's going to show up in New Jersey within the next couple weeks. So I want to put those alerts out early so you start spraying and thinking about control before that pathogen shows up. Jack Rabin up on campus is revitalizing our online resource center. This is the new homepage. It's a work in progress. Again, if you just simply Google Rutgers and online resource, you can find it, and you can grab general information off there. The production guide you should find there. The production guide, if you just want a certain crop section, you can print it out, as well as the frac guide is there as well.